Hello, it is my pleasure to introduce the next panel. Education, Equity, Rights, and the Workforce, a Widening Gap or an Opportunity. This particular panel that started with the idea of education was what prompted the theme of the annual conference, Mind the Gap. All over the world, there is a large gap between what employers are looking for and the existing pipeline of qualified applicants. What is the role of vocational education and university education in preparing students for the workforce or for life? What about soft skills, digital skills, STEM and STEAM? How do we bridge that gap when education programs and workforce training are often siloed in funding and in the way that we address them here in the US and overseas? Additionally, what role does education play in ensuring individuals their human rights? Can we connect these topics or not? Today, we have a great panel to address this who can truly think outside the box and challenge us. Our moderator is Paul O'Brien. Paul is the Executive Director of Amnesty International USA and formerly a SID board member. He also was Vice President of Policy and Campaign for Oxfam and the author of an intriguing book, Power Switch: How Do We Address Extreme Inequality? Susan Reichle is CEO of the International Youth Foundation and a SID board member. A former Foreign Service officer, she brings 25 years of experience, including service as a mission director, and in her final position, serving as the counselor to the agency, USAID's most senior career position. John Bede is the Chief Partnership Officer for LifeRamp, Inc. LifeRamp is an education technology company providing young professionals and college students across the US and Canada with on-demand life coaching to help them lead and succeed in their careers. A former Foreign Service officer and three-time USAID mission director, he brings a lifetime of development experience to this topic. And Constance Elizabeth Swaniker is the founder and CEO at Accent and Arts Limited. Constance obtained her education in Gambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Ghana. This diversity in her background has strongly influenced her outlook on life, art, and business. She established her company just 6 months after she graduated from university. In 20 years, she has built Accent and Arts into a business with over $250,000 in annual sales and employed a workforce of 30 professionals. Her journey exemplifies the link between university, apprenticeship, and vocational training as fundamental pillars of education and the link to the workplace. I now turn to Paul, who will lead and moderate this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you with us. I am just thrilled to be with this great group of panelists. So we're going to get into it in a moment. Just to frame the issue a little bit, to get the conversation going, hopefully in stimulating ways. I think we all know this is a moment of profound disruption. Some would call it a power switch. And some would even say that power switch is being led by young people around the world who are demanding that we use this moment to transform our societies, our economies, and our polities. But there are tough economic and educational consequences to this pandemic, and they're landing now. They're landing in the United States and around the world. We went into this pandemic with structural inequalities, and in health terms, in economic terms, and in racial justice terms. And we all know the anniversary that's just passed, how deep and profoundly they have been felt and are changing our world. We know this year is momentous, and that's why when Anne says, mind the gap, we understand that this is not a year that we will go back to some previous version of normal from. Now we want to spend time today talking about how we prepare for the future, and particularly how we prepare the next generation of leaders for the workplace of the future. And we want to do that in a time when we maybe need to do that with quite a bit of humility, when we're being asked about our own history as a sector and the power dynamics in the sector. So we have three amazing speakers who've been introduced, and they're running really interesting organizations, and they're trying to answer that question themselves. So let's get to it. And I'm going to ask each of them just to say a little bit about their organizations and how they are speaking to and adapting to this moment in the year we find ourselves. If I could, I'd love to start with Susan. Hi, Susan. So tell us about the work of IYF. And we know that it connects to young people all around the world to opportunities that will transform their lives. But what has this year meant to you? And how has it changed your thinking about how to apply your mission?
Well, thank you, Paul. And it's great to see you and be connected with you again. And congratulations on your book. I know it's a really inspiring read, particularly at this critical time. And it's just great to join my two panelists. John Bede, we were reminiscing, we go back 30 years ago. We started USA together and have stayed thick as thieves and friends and colleagues. And Constance Swaniker, who has done amazing work. And we're so proud that she's on IYF's board. So, you know, I mean, just about what we've all experienced this past year, maybe from different vantage points, but definitely at the International Youth Foundation, which was a foundation that was founded 30 years ago. So it's gone through tremendous change and seen a lot that has happened in this world and has been exclusively focused on the mission of positive youth development for more than 30 years now, working in more than 100 countries. But I have to say, Paul, this year, this past really 15 months have challenged us like never before and made us to really revisit who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And so just, you know, a couple of takeaways I'd love to share with the community. First of all is, as you said, young people they are at the center of this. They are not waiting for change, they are creating change. And we've seen that at different periods of our history, but absolutely now more than ever. And the point you made about particularly the horrific anniversary we had to celebrate yesterday with the murder of George Floyd and the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that being so much what we as an organization, I know many of us in the development community, really embracing for what is the change that we need to make internally. With it under our own roofs, and then also obviously with the work that we're doing throughout the globe, and not separating, as we were talking earlier, human rights to education to employment. Young people are leading the way, and it's integrated. And one anecdote I'd like to tell from that is soon after the pandemic hit and the rise of social justice and diversity and equity and inclusion issues, our network, which Constance was part of our Youth Action Network, came to us and said, we're out there, we have to start it, we're addressing these issues and we need help. And organizations like IYF and others getting resources at the grassroots, at the community level. And we were really proud to be able to then launch the Global Youth Resilience Fund. And again, because it's focused on at the grassroots and really creating that action and equity and inclusion. The second piece that really, I think, changed all of us is we're working virtually, right? We're all connecting virtually. So we had to move all of our work of life skills, education, and employment into the virtual world. And we were fortunate to have partners like PepsiCo, who had already worked with us, and having our life skills program on our smartphones and reaching with the goal of reaching 1 million women, to partners like Hilton and others who were clearly hit by the pandemic, but really stuck with investing in youth and particularly being able to move to a remote virtual setting. So I just want to sort of end with also the importance of local. I know it's something you, Paul, and our colleagues have been passionate about, is how do we partner locally? And at IYF, we've been fortunate to always work through local partners, local organizations, and our local offices. And they're the ones who are leading the way. So perhaps that's the silver lining here is it has erupted. What we've all known is the work that's happening at the local level. And I'm just thrilled Constance as well could join this panel, and I'll end there.
Well, that lets me take the conversation to Constance. Hopefully that gets your thinking going. Constance, just to say, the two institutions you've built, Access and Arts and the Design and Technical Institute, feel in many ways to be trying to respond to how we generate real vocational skills that are also 21st century in the sense of, particularly in your latter one, digital literacy. Love to hear about how you're now thinking about your deep commitment to vocational education in this year with everything that's going on.
Thanks, Paul. So one of the biggest challenges that faced us was in March last year when COVID really forced schools to shut down, was that we had to close our doors. And so we had to let our students go and faculty. But here we are, we're a technical vocational school where it's hands-on. And instruction is hands-on. And how do you teach, welding and some of these skills that we teach virtually? So that was a huge challenge for us. And so what we quickly did was that with the partner company that we had, Accents and Art, when it was safer for people to start working in shifts, we realized that, okay, since we had the industry partner, we quickly then moved the students to the factory floor. And so we were able to fast pace and catch up with the practical lessons because one of the biggest challenges is the lack of technology penetration. Now, these are young people who 70% don't have access to smartphones or tablets, and cost of data is very expensive in Ghana. So it didn't work. Only about 1/3 of our students had, smart devices that we could push even content to. So the partnership with industry during this time was very crucial. That allowed us to finish our courses on time. And in fact, we were the only technical school in Ghana that was able to finish a full syllabus in time. And so months later, I saw a UNESCO report that actually stressed how technical and vocational schools were badly affected, as a result of this. And here we were, nobody actually thought of, that yes, even though, okay, you may decide, okay, can we teach welding using welding stimulators? Is not the same, so the deep partnership with industry is very crucial. That it's important that the synergy with industry goes in parallel with teaching courses practically. As a result, we've had to rethink the way we teach. Thankfully, we are all back at school. Every student now has a device. And our big focus is also now on digital skills, because then almost immediately there was a big need to focus on digital skills, where before we hadn't really thought it was that necessary at that particular time.
Well, that's inspiring. Yes, not easy to take a vocational experience virtual, but wonderful to hear the creative thinking. John, I don't know if this is fair, but I'm thinking it might have been a little bit easier to adapt what you were doing to the moment than if you had been working on welding. I know that LifeRamp already uses an amazing technology platform and coaching to help people find their superpower, but all of that must have had to adapt to this moment that we found ourselves in. Really curious to hear how that is and how it has been for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Paul. It's great to connect with you and Constance and reconnect with Susan and Anne. But Susan, you had to mention 30 years. I thought we were going to talk about youth today, but anyway, wonderful to see you. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity to join you. I don't want to sort of splice the middle on this, but the pandemic has really kind of both exacerbated, I think, and really laid bare the challenges that we're all dealing with and facing. it's also presented some, I think, some clear opportunities. You know, when I left the Foreign Service, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to, having spent 2/3 of my career working internationally, I wanted to try to use those skills and experience gained through USAID to work on inequities and issues that we have in the United States, which have really been laid bare by the pandemic. And to the other thing, to really try to, other passion of mine throughout my career is trying to help people get to where they want to go professionally, organizational leadership, and working with them. And really, LifeRamp, we founded along with our CEO in January 2020, right before what hit the fan. And it was, one would say timely in one respect, and in another respect also quite opportune, in that a lot of the sort of issues that companies and universities were facing, employers were facing, organizations across the United States were facing, really kicked into overdrive by the pandemic. Anxiety, issues of turnover, the tremendous change in workforce, the volatility, the fact that, universities are wonderful institutions, been really great engines of social mobility in the United States, but at the same time, they're not necessarily well set up to really provide, as Constance was saying, the key skills which all people need to succeed in any career, which are the soft skills: leadership, teamwork, problem solving, global multicultural fluency. And 90% of corporate managers, they don't see people coming into the workforce with those skills. And in a lot of respects, COVID has really exacerbated that. So we founded the company to really take advantage of one of the most powerful tools I'd seen throughout my career. I benefited from coaching sort of mid-career, and I've seen it work in a lot of different contexts. Businesses, over 90% report a real business return when they use coaching in their organizations for their employees. People that have used coaches, they have 97% say they'd use a coach again. And when you think of all the issues that particularly young people are wrestling with, unsure, unprepared, in a lot of cases, unhappy about kind of either the jobs that they've just embarked on or the career track that they're on, coaching can really help young people look inward. And I think all these things have kind of come together. Certainly here with the International Youth Foundation really is focused on, key workforce issues for the United States and every country. You look at the United States, over 50% of our workforce are millennials. And, in places like India, in the next 5 years, 75% of their workforce are going to be millennials. My last post in USAID in Guatemala, the median age is 23. And a lot of sort of the migration issues that you see happening are the result of lack of opportunity in young people in search of better opportunity elsewhere. So I think, there's a lot of challenge in what I said, but I think the hope is, and as Susan mentioned this, is the people that we're working with, the focus on young people that really have, I think, helped to drive and accelerate change, both in terms of this awakening to the greater racial justice that we need, more gender equity. That's the problem we've been talking about for a long time now. Maybe there's finally more impetus around that. So I'm encouraged because of who's coming up behind us.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I hope that opens up another line of inquiry for all of us. And I'm going to look at you all and see who wants to answer as we go forward. And I'll ask if you don't. But also I'm encouraging those folks who are listening to us today, get those questions into the chat, and they're being curated, and we'll try and bring as many as we can into the room. So building off each of your three, here's an observation. And this is the Society for International Development's annual moment, and international development itself is being reshaped in lots of profound ways by the kinds of things you all are talking about. And also thinking about John's last comment. Here's something somebody said to me recently, and I just to say, in joining Amnesty, I've met with a lot of the Amnesty youth groups on campuses and all virtually, obviously, but I'm sensing this too in terms of how I'm trying to understand where the particular energies are. And what somebody said to me was, you know, in the international development sector, many years ago, young people liked to look in the shop window, and they generally liked what they saw from international development. And that was what gave them the idea that they might want to spend some of their work life in it. And then they wanted to go inside the store and take a look at what international development really had to offer them and what they could bring. And so they started looking at the products. But today's young folks aren't going to stop there. They are going to want to look on the labels, get back into the storeroom, find out how the machinery works, maybe look at the supply chain on how the products got into the store in the first place. And they want to be part of that conversation and to understand and to have honesty around the history of international development and its dynamics, how power is distributed in it. And so they bring all that into this conversation as they try to ask, you know, how do we now engage in forms of useful education and interaction to prepare this generation of change agents. And they're not going to differentiate between international development and social, as Susan said, and so movement building and maybe human rights in the ways that maybe our fields once did. So with all of that, we're trying to offer them an experience of mentoring, coaching, training, partnership. How do you feel what young people are bringing to this equation and what they're looking for is changing the work that you're trying to do in engaging with them, whether it's in Ghana or in the United States or elsewhere? Who'd like to take that first? And then maybe I can hear from each of you.
I'm happy to jump in first, and maybe also just to share from IYF, where more than half of our workforce, our colleagues from around the globe are young people, and I know that's true across the development community. They are radically changing the way we approach development, and I think that's fabulous. And as you said, John, and you know, you and I shared that we spent most of our time in our career overseas and pulled into the work in the U.S. and IYF works in the U.S. And I think there's going to be there's a time when, even though we're part of the Society for International Development, that there's not international development. It's just development, right? We're all in this together, and the Sustainable Development Goals, which are truly universal and affect every country. All of us are working towards those aspirational goals. So, you know, while I think one to recognize we're just at a really pivotal moment of change and transformation. And I personally think that that's a fabulous thing, because as you framed, Paul, they're coming into development, and whether it's working in the US or in other countries, and just thinking about it differently. And most importantly, that young people have to not only be at the table, which is sort of how we used to frame it a bit, of, you know, young people at the table and making things youth inclusive, but they're leading, they're not waiting, and they're helping to take the charge. And I think that's incredibly refreshing. It's created some challenges, obviously, but I think that's a good thing for all of us as we're moving forward, because we're going to have, we're going to see greater impact, ownership, and results.
That's great. Constance or John? Constance, yeah.
So I'd like to add on what Susan said, that we come from a culture where when you're a young person, you're seen and you're not heard. So to Susan's point about making sure that young people's voices are heard, you also have a continent that our leaders, 70% or 80% are above the age of 70. So there's that huge cultural divide where young people don't even have a voice. But with technology, young people are chatting with the rest of the world. There's an underground movement where they have a voice. And so more and more young people are demanding that their voices are heard. And I think this is where we are most concerned about security, what this means. When young people are restless, they feel that their voices are not heard, that for us, we need to then get over those cultural stereotypes very, very quickly. So we come in from a different perspective where, the West would take things for granted. But here we have deep-seated cultural issues that, there's a bigger divide. And so this is something that development partners need to critically look at. How do you then begin to break cultural stereotypes, at the same time respecting the cultural boundaries between, not that you're seen as being imposing your culture, because we're very big on respect as well. So this is, very interesting that when we're speaking the global language, that's one of the things that we talk about, the barriers that, prevents young people from accessing opportunity and making sure that they also earn a seat at the table.
That's great. Thanks. John, did you want to say anything to this?
Yeah, I think that was very well stated by both Susan and Constance. I mean, let's face it, the meme, okay, boomer, didn't come out of nowhere, okay? And I think what Susan said is, they're not waiting anymore. I'm, not to put a personal anecdote on it, but I'm a parent of 2 millennials and 1 Generation Z son. And, just the difference you see in people, that they don't respond to, that's the way we've always done it, or there's nothing we can do about that. And this is enormously positive for pushing change, which has been, long overdue in so many different respects. So, we built a business to try to give coaching and career mentoring and make it more affordable, accessible, and attractive for specifically millennials and Generation Z, who are so key to the workforce, and I think so key to this social change that we're interested in.
That's great. I am delighted to say we've got some questions coming in on the chat, so well done, y'all. And what was really brilliant is, I think you've got 3 questions that could be divided amongst the 3 of you, so I'm going to make an effort to do that. The first one, John, I'm actually going to come back to you, but I'm going to set it up a little bit more because I think it speaks to a broader issue. We know that education, our system here in the United States, has been affected by structural inequalities and is struggling in terms of addressing equities. You've got community college systems that are essentially now increasingly burdening people with debt. They're too close to private models. Because of some of the adversity that unions have faced, the whole process of vocational training in the United States, where properly remunerated non-college jobs through apprentices and vocations, it's tougher and tougher. And so, the growth industry jobs here are not knowledge economy jobs. They're often low paying and service industry jobs. So our system of building a well-educated, inclusive workforce that enjoys the benefits of living in the United States and serving the international development agenda under a lot of stress. And so the question that we got from folks listening is, how can universities and business schools make a bigger difference in fostering more inclusive development? But if you could speak in a way, because I know you engage with universities and colleges, what's it going to take to really address in honest ways some of the structural inequities that we're facing in our tertiary system?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I mentioned, the history of universities, really, they were set up to be engines of social mobility and change. And now they're under what I call the 3D stresses, or the 3D dangers, if you will. One is kind of the dearth of skills, preparing students to launch into their careers with the key skills, the key soft skills that they need. I love IYF's life skills framework and the focus on that. It's so important. The second D, and this kind of relates back to what did the pandemic change? In some cases, these trends, the dearth of skills, predated pandemic. Manpower Group did a survey in February of 2020, and they found that 70% of employers were having great difficulty in finding people to fit the jobs that they were advertising for. Okay, and now we're seeing jobs that are advertised that are going unfilled. And if you look at a Korn Ferry survey that was done recently, they project, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a 6 million gap in terms of being able to fill jobs with people, and globally more than 85 million in terms of gaps. And that's not just because of people not with the right skills. It's the second D, which is demographic challenge. We've been below replacement rate in the United States in terms of population for several years now. Japan has been struggling with this even longer. Europe is facing this. Even India is going to eventually level off. Most countries are going to face this population and overall demographic challenge. And then the third is the diversity or the lack of it. I know we want to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but we know how important this is. I've always looked at diversity, not just from the social justice lens or, the equality, importance of equality, but just look around the world and look at organizational performance and success, whether you're on Wall Street. Funds, managed by exchange-traded funds managed by women outperform those of their counterparts. A big survey that was done of European corporate managers found that the key skills, strategic leadership skills that it takes to run a country are generally held by women. Greater doses of empathy, ability to strategically multitask, all sorts of things there. Kind of the gender inequity issue, which still plagues us. And we know that organizations, whether it's a business or whether it's a government organization that wants to be better representative of its country overseas, that has, when you have a diverse team in any walk of life, nonprofit sector, government, business, you're better able to face complex challenges. You're more innovative. So all those things kind of taken together. So it's diversity, demographics, and this dearth of skills. Now, specifically with universities, I think the thing that's jumped out at me, it's a very tall task, and there are a lot of economic and financial issues wrapped up in accessibility. But I would just take two examples. The University of California, Berkeley, the bastion of free speech movement and progressive thought. For a long time, its student body was not representative of the state of California. In the last 2 years, they have increased the number of African Americans admitted to the university by 45%, and the number of Latinx students by 40%. And that's a public university which has challenges in terms of law of looking at kind of admission based on race, but they've been able to do this by adjusting how they look at things. I think the positive development of ending standardized testing has been good. So they've made, I think, enormous strides on the admission front. There are other universities that have done that as well. And then the other example is Georgia State University. LifeRamp is partnering with them on several issues. They're the only four-year institution in the United States that has no education gaps, achievement gaps based on race, ethnicity, or financial status. It's an enormous achievement. They also graduate more African Americans than any other university in the United States. So when you focus on these kinds of things, you can make a difference, but it's going to be a hard slog.
Yeah, we got some other interesting questions coming in on how universities can evolve to meet some of these challenges. But I want to turn, if I could, Susan, to you and our second question. So this is the pivotal moment. We know our world is not going to be the same after this pandemic. It is really important that the world's best funded development agency understands the transformational moment and signals the importance of investing in the right people, particularly youth, certainly in this panel. So you worked at USAID for a long time. You know how the agency works, and we're being asked. It seems as if their funding for youth programming is taking a dip, and is that signal that you know how it works, that there's something larger at stake, or do you see from your engagement with USAID and your knowledge of the actors and the mission that we're actually going to see a pivot towards investing in this next generation? And they asked specifically, how can we integrate a stronger attention to youth across sectors like governance, given the demographics and the importance of this particular group?
Well, great. Well, first, I'm really excited about this new chapter for USAID under Ambassador Power's leadership. It's a tremendous opportunity to have a former cabinet official. We've never had that lead the agency, and a seat at the principals table. So this is huge, guys. This is like a big change for not just USAID, but for development in general. On the issue of youth, so a couple things. One, to remember the youth policy, the agency's first youth policy. I was actually the head of the Policy Planning and Learning Bureau, was issued a little over 8 years ago, and they are now revising that. So that's a good sign that youth is on the agenda. The new team really wants to make sure we have a strong policy that meets today's challenges. Second, I'm actually co-chair of the Alliance for International Youth Development, the head of the Advocacy Committee. And so what we've been doing over the last, for this year, is a lot of advocacy on the Hill, not for an earmark, because I have to say, as a former government official, I do not believe in earmarks, but the question that the person asked was about the integration, and how do we make sure that youth are integrated, whether it's on governance issues, education, environment, health, across the board. We have the largest youth population in the world. And if we are not integrating youth into the program, we're not going to achieve the results. We're not going to nudge the Sustainable Development Goals. And so the Alliance is advocating for 25% across the 150 account to focus on youth, in a very similar way that we did with gender, and the importance. And we remember 30 years ago, gender was about counting how many women and girls were at a training, and now gender is integrated across development. So I'm optimistic. I think it takes all of us. So wherever you're working and whatever you're doing, please talk about the importance of investing in young people.
Wonderful, thanks. I think that's the first time I've ever heard the sentence, I don't believe in earmarks, where the next sentence hasn't been, except for this one. So well done, you. Constance, a really interesting question here, and I won't paraphrase it too much. An important issue is that the poor view that most youth have of vocational work, especially vocational work for women. Where have you seen some successful examples of reframing this view in order to increase the number and diversity of students in vocational schools? And feel free to disagree with the premise of the question, which is that young people don't think vocational training is something that they should aspire to. I don't know if that's been your experience.
Well, actually, that's she said nothing. I mean, whoever said that has said nothing out of context. Now, let me explain the historical, if I may use Ghana as a case. No African parent certainly wants their child to be working in what we call a blue-collar trade. So we have a huge influx of white-collar jobs and not enough jobs for white-collar sectors. So we haven't invested at all in our technical schools. Our technical schools are very poor quality, and so it's not an option for a lot of parents. Now, we are a young continent where our industrialization agenda is only about to kickstart. So there's a big need for blue-collar jobs and high-quality blue-collar jobs. So the government, a few years ago, embarked on an aggressive drive to upskill technical universities and technical schools, building new ones and retooling, because young people are coming out of work. but yet there are jobs available in blue collar sectors. So this has been now your child has finished university and they're sitting at home. So now there's not an option to look at where the jobs are. And now that we're rebranding, this poor perception is really chipping away very quickly. Now, sadly, our polytechnics were also turned into technical universities. So we are going through an aggressive restructuring of the sector. Ghana has a huge industrial agenda, and we are at the pace where we are actually still, if I may say, in the second sector. So where the rest of the world has moved into the fourth sector, we really are looking at how we are going to fast pace our industrial agenda. So we don't have a choice. Now, when you also talk about the gender factor, traditionally young women are not allowed to work in blue collar jobs or, in certain sectors. So traditionally, if you're a girl, go and do catering or go and do, fashion. Yeah, this is what girls do. But young girls don't wear overalls and they're working alongside their male counterparts. And so there's been a big drive to also then showcase and project more role models. I happen to work in a male-dominated sector because I work in the metal and fabrication sector. So I'm a national role model in Ghana. So there's a deliberate conscious to project more young women like myself who have broken through. And so you see that climbing. So when young girls see other girls who look like them, they also see that there are opportunities. Now, I read a World Bank report, Profiting from Parity, I think, where women who work in male-dominated trades earn ×3. So where you don't see a lot of girls, that's where the money is. So we're looking at all these findings and all these facts, and telling women that, look, this is where the opportunities are and this is where you earn more money. Now, I'd like to stress that most entrepreneurs in Africa are women. I would say 90%. So how do we also increase how much money they're earning and deliberately pushing them into sectors where they have more opportunities? And when women are more empowered, then the community also benefits. So we are going through a deliberate policy to, first of all, rebrand TVET, working with more female role models, and actually investing a lot in the sector. Good thing for us is a lot of the development partners are also investing heavily in technical and vocational skill. MasterCard, through their Young Africa Works, is investing heavily. GIZ as well. So there's a lot of funding in the technical and vocational space. So that's a good sign.
That's wonderful. That's inspiring, and congratulations on the role you play. Right, we've got about 5 minutes, a little more then, but just enough time to hear once more from each of you. You've touched on so many great subjects, and I'm not going to summarize, but I just keep in mind that you've sort of signaled some of the soft skills that you think people who are entering the workforce might want to be thinking about. I know that we've all been in these settings before. I've been at many SID conferences. They're fabulous, but they're often folks are asking the question, so what is coming if I want to be a more effective professional in this space? So maybe speak to them a little bit in your last reflections. What advice do you have for folks who are entering into the broader worlds that we've been talking about today in terms of hard or soft skills that your organizations or you from your life experience have to offer? And maybe Susan, can I ask you to get us going, and then we'll go to John, and let's make sure there's time for Constance.
Sure, I'll kick it off. And I think similarly to John and our sort of post-USAID careers, we wanted to focus on the importance of life skills because we have seen that in our own careers. And often, whether it's in foreign policy development, wherever you decide to focus, we focus on the technical, and that is important. And I saw a question about business schools and, people thinking about sort of what they want to do next, and building that technical area, it's important, but equally, I would almost say more important are the life skills and the skills of communication and teamwork and leadership and conflict management, because no matter where you work around the world, those are the enduring skills you are going to need. We need, all of us, every single day. And what we see, unfortunately, with young people, and just to step back a little bit, even before the pandemic, young people were 3 times more likely than adults to be unemployed. 1 in 4 weren't in training or education or employment. And so these are the skills that are really needed to just get through these very difficult times that are just inherent in being young and starting out your career. You need the life skills of just persistence and doggedness and empathy and whatnot. And they're truly, truly enduring skills that we build. And so, as everyone's starting out, and I consider myself still starting out 30 years later, every day is a new day, and really reaching deeply into what are the skills you want to be building. One, that you're not alone, and the thing that I find so encouraging today in particular is that we're focusing on this and we're talking about it. And whereas before, people were almost afraid to sort of talk about, and it was a given, like you had to have those skills. Well, a lot of us are still working on them every single day. So just, keep at it, and know that you're part of a larger community. And the SID, I'll put in a plug for SID, because we do a lot of mentoring and just one-on-one. And I learn as much from those mentoring sessions being a SID board member as I hope the people who I meet do.
Wonderful. And if you can bottle that sense of still just starting out, please send me a bottle. I'll send you. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, Susan touched on one of the skills that, and all of the life skills that we touched on today are extremely important, I think, to any endeavor, any career. But one in particular really always kind of jumps out, and it's some sectors it's considered a subset of leadership, and that's the quality of empathy. And that's what Susan mentioned it. And it's interesting because we see it from employers who want to bring out greater skill of empathy to have better customer service, or to be able to understand what people who don't look like you or aren't where you're from, why the challenges that they're facing, to be able to get out of your own shoes. So empathy is enormously important. I think related to that, the 2 others that I would pull out, is, of course, is the broader skill of leadership. Organizations that don't have good leaders don't succeed. And so much is predicated on I think, building good qualities of leaders. And then finally, I think we've seen how interconnected we all are, and how important it is to have some understanding of cultures beyond your shores, beyond your communities. So the skill of global multicultural fluency in particular is another one that I think everyone should seek to develop.
That's great. Constance.
So I would touch on confidence building because, as I said, here you're seen and you're not heard. So young people pretty much, where a typical American student, we think, oh my God, they're so confident. So that's the thing, that I have a son who is in school in the US, and he's like, oh, mommy, this kid here is so confident. And so that struck me that, it's such an American thing that you take for granted. But where we are coming from, it's a big thing. So this is something that in allowing young people's voices to be heard, they speak confidently that, are you hearing what I'm saying? Just like an American would say, hear me. Yeah. That our young people definitely need a lot of skills in confidence building. So that's one thing that I would stand out for me.
Wonderful. I love that. And I love all of your reflections. I love that we closed on that, because my experience is that young people are stepping into this moment, and they're changing things, and I don't mean that in a fatuous way. They are, as we said earlier, they are leading, whether we are ready for their leadership or not, and demanding new rules, new ways of thinking, and they're expecting us to follow them in that space, because we can't go back in this moment. I think it's been wonderful to have a chance to be with you. I think we're right on the time we were given. So I think we're being asked just to stay on screen for a little bit, but I just want to, all the people who put in questions, thank you so much. They were great. We didn't get to everyone, but we got to most of them. And hopefully you got something out of this, and you will stay on your journey to continue demanding that this sector lives up to its promise, as hopefully you got a sense it's trying to do from this conversation.